Imagine believing that your entire life has been decided by a force you cannot see. Not because you made terrible choices. Not because you failed to work hard. Not because you were incapable of becoming happy. But because somehow every time life gives you a chance, something goes wrong. That is Sam Greenfield's world. A dropped object, a missed opportunity, a ruined meal, a broken plan. Another perfectly timed disaster. At first, these moments are funny because animation can turn misfortune into physical comedy. But the more we understand Sam, the less funny the pattern becomes. Her bad luck is not simply an amusing character trait. It has become the story she tells herself about who she is. Sam is a teenager who has grown up moving through foster homes, never knowing whether the place she sleeps tonight will still feel like home tomorrow. So when she sees Hazel, another foster child, hoping for the kind of permanent family Sam has never been able to keep, something inside her changes. Sam does not simply want Hazel to be adopted. She wants Hazel to receive the certainty that Sam herself has never had. And that is why luck becomes so important. If one lucky break could change Hazel's chances, maybe everything would finally fall into place. Maybe one perfect event could defeat years of uncertainty. Maybe the universe could finally say yes. That belief leads Sam to Bob, an apparently ordinary black cat who turns out to have access to a hidden world where luck is not mysterious at all. It is organized. It is processed. It is distributed. Good luck and bad luck move through an enormous supernatural system designed to influence the lives of people on Earth. Suddenly, Sam's personal frustration has become part of something much bigger, and that creates the central contradiction of luck. Sam wants to control randomness because she believes randomness is what keeps hurting her. But the film gradually suggests that randomness is not merely an obstacle to living. It is part of living. That distinction matters. Because Sam is not really chasing wealth, popularity, or some fantasy of becoming the luckiest person alive. She is chasing control. She wants to know that Hazel will be safe. She wants to know that her own future will not collapse again. She wants proof that life can be made predictable. And honestly, who would not understand that desire? Most of us have experienced some version of Sam's frustration. A perfect opportunity arrives at the wrong moment. Something important falls apart for no obvious reason. Someone else gets the chance we were hoping for. We watch another person succeed and wonder why the same door never seems to open for us. Eventually, we start using a word to explain the gap between effort and outcome: luck. It becomes convenient because luck allows us to describe the invisible difference between what we can control and what we cannot. We call ourselves lucky when things work. We call ourselves unlucky when they do not. Sometimes that language helps us accept reality. Other times it becomes an excuse to believe that our lives are permanently fixed. Luck takes that idea literally. Its fantasy world asks us to imagine that somewhere behind ordinary human experience, there really is a system deciding which moments will go well and which will go badly. And if such a system existed, the natural human response would probably be the same as Sam's. We would try to get inside. We would try to change the rules. We would try to make sure the people we love received more good fortune than everyone else. But that is where the film's deeper idea begins to emerge. If we could eliminate bad luck completely, we would not simply create a better world. We would create a world where unpredictability itself had been removed. And unpredictability is where discovery, surprise, growth, failure, recovery, and countless unexpected relationships come from. Sam begins by believing that bad luck is the enemy. By the end, she has to confront something much harder. Perhaps the real enemy is the belief that life only becomes meaningful once uncertainty disappears. Section 1.2, Video Roadmap. To understand why that idea matters, we have to look at luck as more than a collection of cute characters and colorful set pieces. The film is built around an unusually ambitious concept. Instead of treating luck as a vague force that simply happens to people, it imagines an entire hidden civilization responsible for managing it. That gives the movie an enormous playground for visual storytelling, but it also creates a philosophical problem. The more complicated the system becomes, the more the film has to explain why something as unpredictable as luck would need a system at all. So we will begin with Sam's story, because the land of luck only matters emotionally if we understand why she is willing to risk everything to reach it. Her history in foster care gives her obsession with good fortune a deeper meaning. She is not simply unlucky. She has spent her childhood learning that circumstances can change without warning. People can leave. Homes can disappear. Promises can fail. Stability can feel temporary. Then there is Hazel, whose presence turns Sam's abstract frustration into a concrete mission. Hazel gives Sam someone to fight for, but she also exposes one of Sam's biggest emotional weaknesses: the belief that she can solve another person's uncertainty if she just works hard enough. That leads naturally to Bob. Bob begins as a mystery, then becomes a guide, a partner, and eventually one of the emotional centers of the story. His relationship with Sam allows the film to explore another form of uncertainty: trust. Bob knows more than Sam, but he also has his own reasons for protecting the secrets of the Land of Luck. As the two characters become increasingly dependent on each other, their partnership becomes less about escaping danger and more about learning that neither of them can completely control what happens next. From there, the film opens into its larger mythology. We will examine the architecture of the Land of Luck, the machinery that makes fortune feel almost industrial, and the creatures who maintain this bizarre ecosystem. We will look at the good luck and bad luck systems and ask whether the movie's fictional bureaucracy actually makes sense, or whether its contradictions reveal something intentional about the way human beings try to organize chaos. We will also examine the dragon, Babe, and the wider supporting cast, because each represents a different relationship to authority, responsibility, or uncertainty. Then we will move into the film's central themes: agency versus fate, control versus acceptance, privilege versus opportunity, belonging versus abandonment, and the psychological need to believe that someone somewhere understands why things happen. After that comes the production itself. Luck was part of a larger attempt to establish Skydance Animation as a serious creator of original animated worlds, while Apple was increasingly becoming an important destination for ambitious original films. That industrial context matters because creating a new animated property without an existing franchise is an enormous challenge. A familiar character arrives with an audience already waiting. A concept like luck has to convince viewers that its world deserves to exist. Finally, we will examine the music, reception, criticism, business model, cultural staying power, and legacy of the film before returning to Sam's central question. Because the most interesting thing about luck may not be whether the movie successfully explains how luck works. It may be that the movie never needed to. What matters is why Sam needs it to work. Section 1.3, Audience Connection. There is a very specific childhood feeling that luck understands almost immediately. The feeling that everybody else somehow gets the good version of life while you keep receiving the leftovers. Someone else gets chosen. Someone else finds the opportunity. Someone else seems to walk through the same day without dropping anything, breaking anything, missing anything, or being embarrassed by anything. You can laugh at it, but somewhere underneath the laughter is a question. Why them? Why not me? As children, we often imagine that one extraordinary event could change everything. Finding money, meeting the right person, winning a competition, getting noticed, receiving a miracle at exactly the right moment. The fantasy is powerful because childhood is full of situations we cannot control. Adults make decisions for us. Circumstances change without asking permission. We depend on families, teachers, institutions, and other people whose choices can shape our lives. Sam carries that feeling into adolescence. Her situation makes the fantasy of luck even more powerful because she has experienced instability in a way many viewers have not. She has learned that even when something feels safe, it may not stay safe. That makes Hazel's desire for a permanent family emotionally devastating for Sam. Hazel represents a possibility Sam wants to protect, but she also represents a version of childhood Sam wishes she could have guaranteed for herself. That is why Sam's behavior can become reckless without becoming incomprehensible. She is not thinking, I want to cheat the universe because I deserve more. She is thinking, if I can just make this one thing work, maybe someone I love will not have to experience what I experienced. That distinction is important. We live in a culture that constantly encourages optimization, better routines, better careers, better relationships, better bodies, better choices, better outcomes. Social media intensifies the illusion because we rarely see other people's randomness. We see the vacation, not the canceled flight. We see the promotion, not the years of rejection. We see the wedding photograph, not the uncertainty behind it. We see somebody else's lucky moment without seeing the thousands of ordinary moments surrounding it. The result is a strange psychological trap. We start comparing our entire lives to someone else's highlight. Sam's world is more literal, but the emotion is familiar. She looks at Hazel and believes that if she can somehow improve the odds, she can protect her future. Many adults make similar bargains with themselves. If I make enough money, nothing can hurt me. If I plan carefully enough, nobody will leave. If I make the right decision, nothing unexpected will happen. But life does not sign those contracts. Something always remains outside our control. That is why luck can connect with viewers far beyond its intended family audience. Almost everyone has a memory of a moment that went wrong for no obvious reason. A missed train, a failed interview, a friendship that ended unexpectedly, a chance that disappeared, a decision that seemed reasonable at the time but led somewhere completely different. Years later, some of those moments may even look lucky in retrospect. That is the strange thing about luck. We often understand it only after the event. And that is exactly where Sam's journey becomes worth following. She begins the film convinced that her life needs better luck. The deeper story asks whether what she really needs is something much harder to manufacture. The confidence to keep living when she cannot know what comes next. Part 2, Context Background. Section 2.1, Production Origins. Luck emerged from an interesting moment for Skydance Animation, a relatively young studio attempting something that established animation companies already understood very well: building a recognizable identity from scratch. The easiest way to attract attention in animation is to begin with something audiences already know. A beloved character, a famous franchise, a best-selling book, a recognizable brand. Original animation has to do something more difficult. It has to make viewers care about a world before that world has any history in their minds. That challenge shaped the ambition behind luck. The concept sounds simple enough. What if luck were real? But the moment filmmakers attempt to visualize that question, the possibilities become enormous. Is luck a force? A substance? A creature? A machine? Probability? Does someone control it? Does it have rules? If good luck exists, what happens to bad luck? And if people receive different amounts of fortune, who decides how much they deserve? The film's solution was to turn luck into an ecosystem. The land of luck is not just a magical location where fortunate things happen. It is a functioning civilization. Luck is processed, moved, categorized, and delivered. That choice gives the movie an advantage that many high-concept animated stories need. An abstract idea becomes something the audience can physically understand. Pipe can carry luck. A machine can sort it. A creature can distribute it. A container can hold it. Once the invisible becomes physical, the filmmakers can build action sequences around it. A character can lose control of a supply. A system can break. A magical object can cross into the human world. A hidden door can provide access to a place that ordinary people never know exists. This is classic fantasy world building, but with a modern twist. Instead of inventing an entirely unfamiliar mythology, the film starts with something every viewer already understands emotionally. Everyone knows what luck feels like. Nobody agrees on what it actually is. That ambiguity gave the production enormous creative freedom. The land of luck could be colorful, mechanical, organic, bureaucratic, playful, and enormous at the same time. The environments could resemble a fantasy kingdom, while also functioning like an industrial facility. This hybrid quality is important because it reflects the film's central idea. Luck is mysterious to humans, but inside the hidden world it has become an administrative process. That creates an intentional contrast between belief and bureaucracy. On Earth, people experience luck as coincidence. Inside the land of luck, coincidence looks like a job. The decision to make Sam a human outsider entering this world also serves a practical storytelling function. She does not understand the system, so the audience can discover it alongside her. Instead of beginning with pages of mythology, the film can use Sam's confusion as an explanation engine. When she asks a question, we learn something. When she breaks a rule, we discover the consequence. When she becomes fascinated by a machine, the audience gets a reason to look at it too. Bob becomes the bridge between these two worlds. As a cat who can move between the human world and the land of luck, he occupies a useful middle position. He understands the hidden rules but still has emotional stakes in the ordinary world. His secrecy creates mystery, while his personality gives the mythology a comedic entry point. Character design is equally important. A concept as strange as luck can become visually overwhelming if every creature and environment competes for attention. The film therefore relies on recognizable silhouettes, exaggerated expressions, contrasting scales, and color-coded spaces to help the audience navigate the fantasy. The production challenge was not simply creating beautiful images. It was creating a world that could be understood quickly enough for an emotional story to continue moving. That is difficult in any animated film, especially one attempting to establish an original mythology. Every new rule requires explanation. Every new creature potentially needs context. Every piece of machinery suggests a function. Every magical object raises a question. The filmmakers had to balance spectacle against clarity. And that balance reveals one of Luck's biggest ambitions. It does not want the fantasy world to exist merely as decoration around Sam's story. The world is supposed to explain the theme. If luck can be manufactured, distributed, and regulated, then the land of luck becomes a physical metaphor for the human desire to turn uncertainty into something manageable. The question is whether the movie can maintain that metaphor once the adventure becomes increasingly complicated. Because building a world around luck is easy, making that world emotionally meaningful is much harder. Section 2.2. Pre-release landscape. Luck arrived in 2022 during a period when animation was undergoing a major shift in how audiences discovered and consumed films. For decades, animated movies have been strongly associated with theatrical release. A new family film was an event. Trailers appeared months in advance. Characters became recognizable through advertising. Parents took children to theaters. Merchandise, posters, television spots, and opening weekend conversation all contributed to the sense that a major animated movie had arrived. Streaming changed that rhythm. By the time Luck appeared, audiences were becoming increasingly comfortable discovering major productions from home. That did not make animation less competitive. In some ways, it made competition even more intense. Instead of choosing between a handful of films playing nearby, viewers could scroll through an enormous library and decide what deserves their attention in seconds. For an original animated movie, that is a serious problem. Established franchises arrive with instant recognition. A sequel already has characters audiences love. A famous studio carries its own expectations. A familiar property can communicate its identity before the first frame begins. Luck had none of those advantages. It had a title. It had Sam. It had Bob. And it had the promise of an entire land of luck waiting behind them. That premise was the film's strongest marketing tool. The idea that there is a hidden world responsible for human fortune is immediately understandable and visually expandable. Trailers could show magical architecture, unusual creatures, comedic accidents, and the contrast between Sam's ordinary life and the secret civilization underneath it. The promotional framing naturally emphasized adventure and comedy, because those are easy qualities to communicate quickly. A girl, a talking cat, a magical world, problem involving luck. Simple. But the actual emotional material was more complicated. Sam's story is rooted in foster care, abandonment anxiety, and the fear that someone she loves may not receive the stability she needs. Those themes are powerful, but they are not as easy to sell in a 30-second trailer as a talking cat falling into trouble. This creates a familiar tension in animated filmmaking. The marketing sells the premise. The movie has to sell the meaning. That distinction became especially important in the streaming environment because audiences could begin watching with very different expectations. Some viewers might arrive wanting a light fantasy comedy. Others might expect a sophisticated animated story. Some might compare it with Disney or Pixar. Others might judge it simply as a family adventure. And those expectations influence reception. Luck also had the challenge of representing Apple and Skydance Animation in the animation market. Neither had the decades-long emotional relationship with audiences associated with the most established animation brands. That meant the film had to prove itself while simultaneously introducing a new studio identity. The opportunity was enormous. If the world worked, Luck could become the beginning of a recognizable mythology. The Land of Luck was flexible enough to support additional stories. Bob was distinctive enough to become a recurring character. The premise itself could theoretically expand into other corners of the universe. But original properties are risky precisely because their futures cannot be guaranteed. A franchise is valuable partly because audiences already understand it. An original film has to earn that understanding. That made Luck's release more than the arrival of another animated adventure. It was also a test of whether a streaming platform and a newer animation studio could create a new property strong enough to compete for attention in a marketplace increasingly dominated by familiar names. The answer would depend on something the marketing could not completely control: whether audiences would emotionally connect with Sam. Because if they did, the machinery and magic could become memorable. If they did not, even the most elaborate Land of Luck would remain only a beautiful place. Part 3 Story Recap. Section 3.1. Act 1 Setup. Luck begins by establishing Sam Greenfield through a pattern rather than a biography. Things go wrong around her constantly. What could have been a normal moment becomes a minor disaster. Ordinary activities seem to bend toward inconvenience. The comedy works because the failures are exaggerated, but the repetition quickly communicates something more serious. Sam has internalized the idea that bad outcomes follow her. She has lived with that feeling for years. As a foster child, Sam has moved through homes and learned that belonging is never entirely guaranteed. She has experienced enough instability to understand that a place can be comfortable without being permanent. Adults can care about her without becoming her family forever. A door can open and still eventually close. That history changes how we interpret her relationship with luck. For someone who has grown up with uncertainty, good fortune is not merely exciting. It represents safety. Sam's connection with Hazel makes this even clearer. Hazel is another child in the foster system, and Sam becomes deeply attached to her. She wants Hazel to experience the things Sam has never been able to take for granted: a permanent family. The problem is that Sam does not trust the universe to provide it. She sees how easily circumstances can change, so she begins looking for ways to influence them. A lucky penny becomes important because it represents exactly what Sam wants: a small, tangible object that seems capable of changing an outcome. When she encounters an apparent stroke of good fortune, she becomes fascinated by the possibility that luck can actually be transferred. Then Bob appears. At first, he seems like an ordinary black cat, except for one obvious problem. He behaves like a creature with secrets. Sam gradually discovers that Bob has access to a hidden realm connected to luck, and what begins as curiosity becomes an opportunity. For Sam, this is not simply a magical discovery. It is the answer to a question she has been asking her entire life. What if bad luck is not permanent? What if it can be changed? What if Hazel could receive enough good fortune to finally get the family she deserves? Sam follows Bob into the hidden world because she believes she has finally found the mechanism behind the randomness that has controlled her life. The Land of Luck appears as an impossible civilization operating behind the ordinary world, and its existence immediately changes the meaning of everything that came before. Maybe Sam was never imagining the pattern. Maybe luck really is a system. And if it is a system, systems can be manipulated. That realization becomes the doorway into the film's central conflict. Section 3.2. Act 1 Continued Call to Adventure. Entering the Land of Luck changes Sam's understanding of reality. The magical world is enormous, organized, and surprisingly functional. Cats have access to it. Luck is treated almost like a resource, and the creatures who maintain the system operate according to rules Sam does not understand. For a moment, this is exactly what she has been searching for. The randomness of life has a structure. Good luck can be identified. Bad luck can be separated. Fortune can be moved. The invisible has become visible. Sam's excitement is understandable, but it also makes her dangerous. She is not entering the Land of Luck simply because she is curious. She has an objective. Hazel needs help, and Sam believes she has found the perfect tool. Bob, meanwhile, is far more cautious. He understands the risks of exposing the magical world to a human. His reluctance also reveals something about his personality. Bob is not simply a mysterious guide who knows the rules. He is someone who has built a life around avoiding unnecessary risk. He wants freedom, but he also wants security. He knows what he has, and he is afraid of losing it. Sam and Bob therefore begin their relationship from opposite positions. Sam is willing to break rules because she believes the stakes justify it. Bob wants to preserve the rules because he believes consequences are real. That difference becomes the foundation of their partnership. As Sam explores the land of luck, she sees how massive the operation really is. Fortune is not represented as a mystical blessing floating through the universe. It is processed through infrastructure. There are systems for good luck and bad luck, mechanisms for distributing outcomes, and authorities responsible for maintaining the balance. The concept is funny because it resembles a workplace. Something as mysterious as destiny has employees. Sam cannot stop thinking about Hazel. The more she learns, the more convinced she becomes that she can solve the problem. If good luck is stored somewhere, she only needs to find a way to get it to Hazel. The distinction between natural chance and artificial distribution becomes increasingly important. Sam sees luck as something she can use strategically. The land of luck sees it as part of a larger system. Bob sees it as something that should be handled carefully. The conflict is therefore not yet about good versus evil. It is about perspective. Sam believes the system exists to provide opportunities. The system believes it exists to maintain balance. Those ideas can coexist only until someone tries to change the equation. Sam eventually crosses that line. She decides that the rules are less important than Hazel's future. Her intentions are compassionate, but compassion does not automatically make an action harmless. By interfering with the machinery of luck, Sam begins a chain of consequences she cannot fully predict. And that is the irony. The girl who entered a magical world to escape the uncertainty of life is now creating uncertainty on a much larger scale. Section 3.3. Act 2: A Rising Action. Sam's determination grows as she realizes that getting Hazel good luck is more complicated than simply finding a magical object. Every attempt to manipulate the system creates another problem. The land of luck is interconnected, which means changing one outcome can affect others. This becomes the source of much of the film's comedy. Sam acts quickly. Bob reacts cautiously. Sam believes there must be a shortcut. Bob knows shortcuts usually have consequences. Their arguments give the adventure energy, but beneath the humor is a growing emotional connection. Bob begins to understand why Sam is willing to take such extreme risks. She is not chasing luck for herself. She is trying to protect Hazel from the uncertainty that has shaped her own childhood. That makes it harder for Bob to simply walk away. As they move deeper into the land of luck, the film expands its mythology. Magical creatures populate the hidden world, each contributing to the sense that luck is not a single force but a complex ecosystem. The dragon occupies a particularly important position because of her authority and scale. She represents a level of power far beyond Sam's understanding. Sam's impatience repeatedly clashes with the caution of those around her. She sees a problem. She wants a solution. She does not want a lecture about balance. That makes her relatable, but it also exposes her flaw. Sam has become so accustomed to uncertainty that she tries to defeat it through action. If she keeps moving, planning, improvising, and fixing things, perhaps she will never have to sit with the possibility that some outcomes cannot be guaranteed. Bob's own history complicates their relationship. He has reasons to value his current life, and those reasons make him afraid of losing control. Sam and Bob therefore become mirrors of each other. Both are frightened of uncertainty, but they respond differently. Sam charges toward it. Bob tries to avoid it. Their partnership slowly forces both characters to change. Meanwhile, Hazel's life continues in the human world. That parallel is essential because it keeps the story emotionally grounded. While Sam explores impossible magical machinery, Hazel remains a child waiting for a future she cannot control. The contrast creates urgency. Sam can see the machinery. Hazel cannot. Sam believes she can influence the outcome. Hazel simply has to wait. The more Sam interferes, the more fragile the luck system becomes. What looked like a clean division between good and bad fortune starts revealing its complexity. Luck is not a simple supply of positive outcomes. It exists within a larger balance. The first major setback makes that clear. Sam's plan does not produce the perfect result she imagined. Instead, it exposes a dangerous truth. If luck can be moved around, then someone can lose it when someone else gains it. The problem is no longer whether Sam can help Hazel. The problem is whether she can help Hazel without hurting someone else. That is the point where the adventure begins turning into a moral dilemma. Section 3.4. Act 2B Midpoint Crisis. The midpoint of luck is where the fantasy begins revealing its philosophical purpose. Sam has spent much of the story believing that bad luck is simply a defective version of life. If good luck is available, why should anyone have to experience the bad kind? But the land of luck forces her to confront a more complicated reality. Bad luck exists for a reason within the system. Not because suffering is inherently good. Not because people deserve misfortune. But because a world without uncertainty would stop behaving like a world. The idea threatens everything Sam believes. She has built her identity around the assumption that better circumstances will produce a better life. Hazel needs a family, so Sam searches for luck. Sam fears abandonment, so she looks for control. Her logic seems compassionate, but it contains an impossible promise. She believes she can guarantee an outcome that nobody can guarantee. That realization becomes emotionally painful. Bob also reaches a breaking point because protecting Sam and protecting the land of luck begin to feel like incompatible responsibilities. His loyalty to the system conflicts with his growing attachment to her. The crisis becomes larger as the magical infrastructure starts destabilizing. What Sam thought was a solution begins looking like a threat. And this is where the film's central metaphor becomes clearest. Human beings often imagine that the problem with life is randomness itself. If we could only know what would happen, we could prevent pain. But removing uncertainty would also remove the possibility of unexpected joy. Sam's false victory cannot last because it is built on the wrong premise. She wants a guaranteed future for Hazel. But a future that is completely guaranteed is not really a future. It is a predetermined result. Hazel's story therefore becomes more than a reason for Sam to act. Hazel becomes the person who reminds Sam that love does not mean controlling another person's life. Sometimes love means supporting someone while accepting that you cannot decide what happens to them. Sam has to face the consequences of her choices. She has to admit that good intentions do not erase responsibility. And she has to consider the possibility that Hazel may experience disappointment even if Sam does everything right. For someone like Sam, that is terrifying. Because uncertainty is exactly what she has been fighting. The emotional turning point comes when she begins to understand that her job is not to guarantee Hazel's happiness. Her job is to love Hazel without pretending that love can eliminate every risk. That is a much more mature definition of hope. Hope does not say everything will work. Hope says that even when we cannot know how things will work, we can still choose what kind of person we want to be. Sam is finally beginning to understand the difference. Section 3.5. Act 3 Climax Resolution. The final act brings the consequences of Sam's interference to their largest scale. The land of luck is no longer simply a hidden place Sam can enter and leave. Its instability threatens the system itself, and therefore the balance between the magical world and the human one. Sam and Bob have to confront the problem they helped create. But the emotional stakes are now clearer. Sam is no longer fighting simply to obtain good luck for Hazel. She is fighting to protect Hazel without sacrificing the balance that affects everyone else. That difference marks her transformation. Earlier, Sam would have chosen the outcome she wanted regardless of the consequences. Now she has to consider the people she cannot see. Her understanding of responsibility has expanded beyond her immediate emotional circle. Bob faces his own fear as well. He has spent much of the story protecting himself from uncertainty, but his friendship with Sam forces him to take a risk. Trusting someone means accepting that you cannot control what they do. It means allowing another person to make choices that could affect you. The dragon's role becomes especially important because her authority represents the larger system Sam has been challenging. Yet the final resolution is not simply about one side defeating another. The deeper conflict is between control and balance. Sam accepts responsibility. She stops trying to force the universe into the shape she wants. She begins acting from trust rather than fear. The crisis is eventually resolved, and the land of luck is restored to balance. But the emotional resolution matters more than the mechanical one. Hazel's future is still uncertain. Sam's own circumstances are still complicated. Nothing magically transforms into a perfect life. And that is precisely why the ending works as a thematic conclusion. Sam does not become powerful because she learns how to control luck. She becomes stronger because she stops needing to. Her relationship with Bob reaches its emotional resolution through mutual trust. Their journey began with secrecy and suspicion, but it ends with the understanding that neither character has to face uncertainty alone. The final images also reframe what came before. Earlier, Sam looked at luck as a force that determined whether life would go well. By the end, luck has become something more nuanced. It can influence circumstances, but it cannot define meaning. Sam may or may not become luckier in the conventional sense. What changes is how she interprets what happens to her. That is the real resolution. Luck cannot guarantee belonging. It cannot erase abandonment. It cannot promise that Hazel's future will be perfect. But Sam no longer needs a guarantee to believe that the future is worth entering. And that is why the story ultimately becomes less about fortune than agency. You cannot choose every event. You can choose what you do with the events you receive. Part 4. Character Analysis. Section 4.1. Protagonist Deep Dive. Sam is an effective protagonist because her external goal and internal goal are almost identical without actually being the same thing. On the surface, she wants to help Hazel find a permanent family. Underneath that objective is something more personal. Sam wants control over a life that has repeatedly taught her that control is impossible. Her compassion is real. So is her fear. That combination makes her decisions understandable, even when they become reckless. Sam's foster care experience gives her a reason to distrust stability. She has learned that homes can change and relationships can be temporary. When Hazel faces the possibility of another uncertain future, Sam reacts emotionally because she recognizes herself in Hazel. But instead of sitting with that fear, Sam turns it into a practical problem. Find luck. Change the odds. Fix the outcome. That behavior tells us something important about her personality. Sam is resourceful because she has had to be. She knows how to adapt. She can think quickly. She is willing to take action when other people hesitate. Those qualities are strengths. They are also weaknesses. Her impulsiveness comes from the same place as her courage. She acts because waiting feels dangerous. If she does nothing, uncertainty wins. So she keeps moving. That is why warnings rarely stop her. She is not necessarily arrogant. She is desperate. The difference matters. A selfish character would want luck because she believes she deserves more than everyone else. Sam wants it because she believes someone she loves needs it. Her moral problem is not a lack of empathy. It is an inability to recognize the limits of empathy. She loves Hazel so much that she begins believing she knows what outcome Hazel needs. That is where protection becomes control. Her relationship with Bob challenges this pattern. Bob cannot simply obey Sam because he understands the consequences she does not see. Their arguments force Sam to confront information that does not fit her emotional plan. Eventually, Bob becomes more than a guide. He becomes evidence that trust does not require certainty. Sam cannot know that Bob will always stay. She cannot know that Hazel's life will turn out perfectly. She cannot know that every future decision will be correct. But she can choose to trust people anyway. That is her transformation. She does not move from unlucky to lucky. She moves from control to acceptance. And that makes the character more psychologically interesting than the premise initially suggests. Sam begins the film believing that a better life requires better circumstances. She ends it understanding that a meaningful life can exist even when circumstances remain unpredictable. Section 4.2. Antagonist Psychology. Luck does not fit neatly into a traditional villain structure, because its central conflict is not simply a battle between a hero and an evil individual. The opposing force is partly institutional. It is the belief that order must be protected even when order begins limiting freedom. That makes the land of luck itself an important part of the antagonist psychology. The system exists to preserve balance. That sounds reasonable. In fact, it sounds responsible. If luck affects billions of lives, someone has to manage it. But the moment an institution becomes responsible for determining outcomes, questions of authority appear. Who decides what is fair? Who understands the people receiving the luck? What happens when the system's rules conflict with an individual's needs? Babe represents some of this institutional mentality through humor. Bureaucracy becomes funny because magical beings behave like workers inside a gigantic organization, complete with procedures, responsibilities, and authority structures. The comedy hides a serious idea. Systems are often designed to protect people, but systems can also become more concerned with protecting themselves. The fear of chaos is understandable. If luck were completely uncontrolled, people might experience extreme unpredictability. But eliminating uncertainty entirely would create another problem. Life would become engineered rather than lived. The dragon provides a contrasting form of leadership. Her power makes her intimidating, but her position also gives her a broader perspective than Sam has. She represents authority that understands the scale of the system, even when that authority can feel emotionally distant. This creates an interesting contrast between Sam and the institutions around her. Sam wants predictable outcomes because she is afraid. The system wants predictable distribution because it is afraid of chaos. Both are responding to uncertainty. The difference is that Sam's fear is personal, while the system's fear is structural. That makes them thematic mirrors. Both believe control can prevent disaster. Both eventually discover that control has limits. This is why the film's rejection of absolute control matters. It is not arguing that organization is bad or that people should simply surrender to randomness. It is arguing that no system can guarantee a perfect life. Bad luck cannot simply be removed, because life does not consist of isolated positive and negative events. Sometimes the event we call bad becomes the event that redirects us. Sometimes failure teaches something success never could. Sometimes an unexpected encounter changes an entire life. The antagonist therefore becomes less a person and more an idea, the belief that safety requires eliminating uncertainty. Sam must defeat that idea inside herself before the story can resolve it in the external world. Section 4.3. Supporting Cast Dynamics. Bob is arguably the character who makes luck's complicated premise emotionally accessible. Without him, the land of luck could become an enormous collection of rules and visual ideas. Bob gives the audience someone who reacts to Sam's behavior, questions her decisions, and provides a more cautious perspective. His feline identity is also useful because cats already carry a cultural association with mystery and independence. Bob can move between ordinary life and supernatural space without seeming completely out of place. But his personality is more important than his species. Bob wants to protect what he has. That desire makes him a natural counterweight to Sam, who is willing to risk everything to change what she does not have. He fears losing his freedom and security, while Sam fears never finding them. Their friendship grows because each character gradually discovers something missing in the other's worldview. Sam teaches Bob that avoiding risk is not the same as living safely. Bob teaches Sam that rushing into uncertainty without considering consequences is not the same as being brave. Hazel is the emotional reason the entire adventure exists. It would be easy for the film to reduce her to a plot device, but her innocence and vulnerability are essential because they make Sam's mission emotionally credible. Hazel represents possibility. She is still young enough to believe that her future can change, and Sam wants to protect that hope. But Hazel also represents something Sam cannot control. Her life belongs to her. That makes Sam's journey more complicated and more meaningful. Babe brings comic energy to the world and helps turn bureaucracy into entertainment. Through characters like Babe, the film can explain complicated systems without allowing the story to become relentlessly serious. Then there is the dragon, whose scale and authority create a different emotional texture. She represents power, responsibility, and distance. Her presence reminds the audience that the land of luck is not merely a playground. It is a civilization with consequences. Together, these characters form a thematic ensemble. Sam represents the desire for control. Bob represents cautious trust. Hazel represents hope and belonging. Babe represents institutional absurdity. The dragon represents authority and balance. The comedy between them keeps the film moving. But the deeper value of the ensemble is that each character provides a different answer to the same question. What do you do when you cannot control what happens next? Some characters resist. Some manage. Some trust. Some try to control. And Sam has to learn which response allows her to keep moving without losing herself. Part 5 Theme Symbolism. Section 5.1 Core Themes. The central theme of luck is the human desire to control uncertainty. The film begins with a girl who believes her life would improve if only the odds were better. But the deeper question is whether better odds can ever guarantee happiness. Luck separates luck from agency in an important way. An event can happen because of chance, but our response to that event is not necessarily determined by chance. Sam cannot choose every circumstance, but she can choose how she responds to those circumstances. That distinction becomes especially powerful when we consider the difference between hope and certainty. Hope says something good might happen. Certainty demands that something good will happen. Sam begins by demanding certainty. She wants Hazel's future guaranteed. She wants her own future stabilized. She wants evidence that uncertainty has finally ended. But the film gradually shows why that desire is impossible. The fantasy of guaranteed happiness is attractive because uncertainty is frightening. If we knew exactly what would happen tomorrow, we could prepare for it. But preparation has limits. Even the most organized life can be interrupted by coincidence, accident, loss, or opportunity. Luck also raises questions about privilege. If some people seem to receive more fortunate circumstances than others, how much of success is actually deserved? How much is opportunity? How much is timing? How much is environment? The film does not completely solve those questions, but it makes them visible. Sam's childhood insecurity gives the theme emotional weight. Belonging cannot simply be manufactured by good fortune. A family is not a prize delivered to someone who has accumulated enough luck. That is why the distinction between helping someone and controlling their life becomes so important. Sam wants to help Hazel, but eventually she learns that helping someone does not mean guaranteeing their outcome. Emotional resilience comes from learning that uncertainty is survivable. You can be disappointed and continue. You can lose something and still love again. You can experience bad luck without allowing it to become your identity. That is ultimately what makes the theme relevant beyond the fantasy world. Modern life constantly encourages us to optimize. Luck quietly asks whether optimization has limits. Maybe happiness is not what happens when every variable is correct. Maybe happiness also comes from discovering that you can survive the variables you never controlled. Section 5.2 Visual Symbolism. The greatest symbolic strength of luck is that it gives physical form to an invisible concept. Instead of asking audiences to imagine what luck looks like, the film builds an entire visual vocabulary around fortune and misfortune. Green and gold naturally become associated with prosperity, energy, and fortunate outcomes. Brighter spaces suggest possibility, while darker environments can create a sense of instability or danger. These contrasts allow the audience to feel the difference between good and bad fortune before the characters explain it. The lucky penny is one of the simplest symbols. A tiny object becomes a physical representation of chance. It is small enough to carry, simple enough to understand, and meaningful enough to change how Sam interprets events. The land of luck expands that idea dramatically. Its pipes, machines, transportation systems, and conveyor-like structures make luck look manufactured. The visual language resembles a factory, but the product is not steel or food. It is possibility. That is an intentionally strange image. The architecture suggests that even something as mysterious as fortune can become industrialized. Cats function as supernatural intermediaries because they occupy a space between familiar and mysterious. Bob can exist in the ordinary world while also belonging to the hidden one, making him a living bridge between human experience and magical explanation. The dragon's visual scale creates another symbolic contrast. Sam is small. The system is enormous. Her personal fear is placed against a civilization that appears capable of influencing countless lives. This helps communicate one of the film's central ideas. Individual beings often feel tiny when facing systems they cannot understand. Sam's movement between the human and magical worlds also has symbolic meaning. The human world represents the life she knows, while the land of luck represents the hidden explanations she desperately wants to find. As the story progresses, the distinction between those worlds becomes less important. The real transformation happens inside Sam. The ending's visual callbacks reinforce that change. Images associated earlier with control, machinery, and fortune acquire a different meaning once Sam understands that luck is not a substitute for agency. The visuals, therefore, do more than decorate the story. They make the theme visible. Section 5.3 Deeper Meanings. Underneath its fantasy mythology, luck is deeply interested in magical thinking. Human beings have always tried to find patterns in randomness. We create rituals before important events. We carry objects we consider lucky. We avoid certain numbers. We connect unrelated events because our brains are uncomfortable with chaos. The idea that luck exists as a physical system is therefore an exaggerated version of something people already do. We imagine that there must be a reason. If something good happens, we call ourselves lucky. If something bad happens, we blame bad luck. Sometimes that explanation helps us process uncertainty. Other times, it prevents us from recognizing how complicated reality really is. Luck also works as a metaphor for opportunity. Two people can work equally hard and still receive very different opportunities because of timing, environment, family circumstances, social structures, or simple coincidence. Sam's belief that one lucky break can solve everything reflects a powerful fantasy. If only the right door opened, the rest of life would become easier. But opportunity and outcome are not identical. A lucky opportunity can change a life. You cannot guarantee what someone does with that opportunity. This is particularly meaningful within Sam's foster care storyline, because she has experienced the absence of guaranteed stability. She wants to believe that if the correct external variable changes, everything else will follow. The emotional danger is that she begins trying to engineer another person's happiness. That is something many people do in ordinary life. Parents try to protect children from every disappointment. Friends try to solve each other's problems. Partners try to eliminate uncertainty for one another. But love cannot remove reality's unpredictability. The film's philosophical question therefore becomes surprisingly large. Is a predictable life actually a better life? A completely predictable future might eliminate fear. But it would also eliminate surprise. Discovery depends on encountering something you did not expect. Relationships often begin through accidents. Opportunities appear because plans fail. Randomness can hurt, but randomness can also create possibility. That is the deeper meaning of the land of luck. It represents our fantasy that chaos has an administrator. Someone knows. Someone controls. Someone is deciding. The comforting truth is that no such guarantee exists. And the frightening truth is that we may be better off without one. Part 6 Production Breakdown. Section 6.1 Animation Visual Effects. The animation of luck has one major responsibility that goes beyond making characters attractive or environments spectacular. It has to make an invisible idea feel physical. That is why the land of luck becomes the film's greatest visual advantage. The world needs to look like a place where fortune can actually be manufactured. Machines have to communicate function. Architecture has to communicate hierarchy. Creatures have to feel like they belong to an ecosystem. And the characters have to remain emotionally readable inside environments that are constantly demanding attention. Sam's animation is particularly important because much of her personality is communicated physically. She moves quickly, reacts impulsively, and often looks as though her body is already halfway into her next decision. Her physicality reinforces her psychology. Bob presents a different challenge. Animating a cat convincingly while giving him human-level emotional expression requires careful balance. Too realistic, and the character may become difficult to read. Too exaggerated, and the feline identity disappears. The land of luck allows the animators to work at a much larger scale. The environments can stretch beyond realistic architecture into fantasy machinery. Pipes, structures, transportation systems, and magical effects turn abstract concepts into physical events. Lighting and color also separate the worlds. The ordinary human environment is more familiar, while the land of luck can embrace exaggerated fantasy colors and impossible shapes. That visual contrast helps the audience understand when Sam has crossed into another reality. Action sequences benefit from the same approach. Luck can be represented through movement, objects, transformation, and cascading consequences. When the system becomes unstable, the audience does not need every rule explained because the visual language itself communicates disruption. The dragon's animation provides another opportunity to use scale. Her physical presence can make authority feel enormous before she even speaks. There is also a strong tradition of visual comedy throughout modern animation, and Luck uses physical exaggeration to keep its heavier ideas accessible. Characters fall, collide, react, and move through spaces in ways that turn abstract problems into readable jokes. Technically, the film demonstrates the growing sophistication of modern computer animation, but it also faces a familiar problem. Beautiful animation is now common. A polished fantasy world alone is no longer enough to make an animated movie visually revolutionary. Some elements of Luck can therefore feel connected to broader animation trends, particularly the polished rendering, expressive character design, exaggerated environments, and colorful fantasy architecture audiences have seen elsewhere. Its visual originality is strongest when the world directly expresses the idea of luck. That is where the production design becomes storytelling rather than decoration. Section 6.2 Directorial Vision. The directorial challenge of Luck is enormous because the movie is attempting to combine several different films inside one story. It is a fantasy adventure, a comedy, a foster care story, a buddy movie, a magical world mystery, and a philosophical exploration of uncertainty. The direction, therefore, has to keep changing emotional gears without making the film feel fragmented. The secret world structure helps. Sam begins in an ordinary environment, discovers something impossible, and gradually enters a much larger mythology. That progression creates a natural escalation. The audience learns the world at roughly the same speed that Sam does. Bob and Sam provide the emotional center, which is important because the mythology could easily overwhelm the human story. Whenever the Land of Luck becomes complicated, the relationship between these two characters brings the film back to something recognizable. Hazel serves a similar function. Her storyline reminds us why Sam entered this world in the first place. The challenge is that elaborate mythology requires exposition. The more detailed the luck system becomes, the more the film has to explain. Some of that explanation can be integrated into action and comedy, but there are moments when the machinery of the world begins to compete with the emotional simplicity of the story. This is one of Luck's most noticeable balancing problems. The premise is wonderfully simple. The mythology is not. The direction succeeds when spectacle reveals character or theme. It becomes less effective when world-building feels like information the audience must memorize. Pacing also becomes important. Animated adventures need momentum, especially for younger viewers, but emotional stories require pauses. Sam needs moments where the audience can understand what she is afraid of. Bob needs space to become more than comic relief. Hazel needs enough presence to remain a person rather than simply the motivation for Sam's actions. When those elements work together, the movie feels surprisingly warm. When they compete, the film can feel overloaded. Still, the overall directorial vision remains clear. The magical world exists to dramatize the central theme, while the relationship between Sam and Bob exists to humanize it. The movie is at its strongest when those two purposes become the same thing. Part 7 Music Sound. Section 7.1 Musical Score Analysis. The musical identity of Luck has to perform a delicate balancing act. The film needs the score to make the Land of Luck feel magical and enormous, but it also needs the music to remain emotionally connected to Sam's personal story. Fantasy animation often relies on orchestration to establish wonder. Strings can create warmth. Brass can provide scale. Percussion can drive action. Woodwinds and lighter textures can suggest playfulness. Luck uses those traditions to create a world that feels energetic rather than purely mysterious. Sam's musical identity is closely tied to movement and emotion. Her story begins with frustration and uncertainty, so the score needs to communicate both her restlessness and her hope. As she enters the Land of Luck, the musical palette can expand because the world itself expands. Bob benefits from lighter musical treatment. His presence often creates opportunities for humor, curiosity, or mischief. The score can therefore make him feel playful without turning him into a purely comedic character. Hazel's scenes require something different. Her emotional importance means the music surrounding her has to feel sincere. If the score becomes too sentimental, the scene risks feeling manipulated. If it becomes too restrained, the audience may not fully feel the stakes. The best moments are therefore those where the music supports rather than dictates emotion. Adventure sequences allow the orchestra to become larger. Magical crises require urgency. The climax needs escalation, but that escalation only matters because the audience understands what Sam is trying to protect. Music can also create contrast. A comedic scene may suddenly soften when Sam realizes the consequences of her actions. A large fantasy sequence may become quieter when the story returns to her fear of losing Hazel. Those reductions in musical intensity are often as important as the loud moments. Silence or restrained instrumentation can make an emotional realization feel more personal, because the audience is no longer being pushed toward excitement. Musical callbacks also help connect the ending to the beginning. If early themes represent Sam's desire for control, their later transformation can suggest emotional growth. The score therefore becomes part of the storytelling architecture. It tells us when the Land of Luck should feel wondrous, when it should feel dangerous, and when the fantasy should disappear long enough for us to remember that the real story is about a girl afraid of losing the people she loves. Section 7.2. Song Sound Design. Sound design gives Luck another opportunity to make Luck feel physical. If the Land of Luck is a functioning civilization, it should not merely look mechanical. It should sound mechanical. Machines need movement. Pipes need pressure. Magical systems need rhythm. Creatures need distinctive voices and physical sounds. Those details create the impression that the Land of Luck continues functioning, even when the characters are not looking at it. The soundscape of the magical world can therefore contrast with the human world. Ordinary environments rely on familiar ambience. Streets, rooms, footsteps, doors, traffic, and everyday movement. The Land of Luck introduces sounds that do not exist in ordinary life. This contrast reinforces the transition between worlds. Bob's physical sounds also contribute to his personality. Cats communicate through movement, reactions, and small noises, so the sound design can emphasize his physical comedy without relying entirely on dialogue. Fantasy creatures require similar treatment. Their sounds help define scale, personality, and threat. Comedic sound effects can make a simple accident feel larger than life, while action sequences require precise layering, so that movement remains understandable rather than becoming noise. The most important use of sound, however, may be emotional quiet. When everything becomes loud and spectacular, A quiet moment can suddenly feel enormous. That is especially useful for Sam. Her story is full of external chaos, but her deepest fear is internal. Sound design can therefore create a meaningful contrast between the noisy machinery of luck and the quiet moments when Sam realizes that no machine can guarantee the future she wants. The result is a reminder that sound in animation is not merely decoration. It gives physical identity to the invisible. Luck is an abstract concept. The film makes it audible. Part 8. Cultural Impact. Section 8.1. Immediate Reception. When Luck arrived, the immediate appeal of its premise was obvious. A hidden world responsible for human fortune is the kind of idea that can generate curiosity before anyone has seen the movie. Add a determined teenager, a talking black cat, magical creatures, and elaborate fantasy environments, and the film has an easily communicable identity. Audiences naturally gravitated towards Sam and Bob because their relationship gives the movie its most accessible emotional structure. Sam is energetic and determined, while Bob is cautious, sarcastic, and mysterious. Their contrast creates an immediate buddy dynamic. The Land of Luck also became one of the film's most discussed elements because it is visually expansive. Viewers could appreciate the idea even when they were less convinced by every aspect of the story. Online discussion around animated movies often divides into two conversations. One asks whether the movie is entertaining. The other asks whether it is memorable. Luck can satisfy the first question more easily than the second. Its colorful environments, comedic moments, and character interactions give audiences plenty to enjoy. But streaming releases can create a different kind of cultural footprint than theatrical events. A film can be watched by many people without becoming a dominant public conversation. That distinction matters. A theatrical animated hit can become part of the cultural calendar. People talk about opening weekends, box office numbers, trailers, merchandise, and the experience of seeing the film together. A streaming movie is often discovered individually. Someone watches it at home. Another person discovers it months later. A family watches it on a weekend. A child remembers Bob even if they cannot remember the exact plot. That fragmented viewing pattern can make a movie's cultural impact harder to measure through conventional conversation. Reactions to Luck naturally reflected that diversity. Some viewers appreciated its emotional premise and imaginative world. Others found the plot predictable or the mythology overly complicated. Comparisons to established animated films were inevitable because modern audiences have extremely high expectations for animation. Still, the emotional storyline remained one of the film's strongest points. Sam's relationship with Hazel gives the movie stakes that go beyond magical adventure. And Bob provides the kind of character who can remain memorable even when the surrounding mythology is more complicated. The film may not have dominated mainstream conversation, but that does not mean it disappeared. Streaming allows certain animated films to develop slowly. Instead of one massive cultural moment, they can accumulate smaller audiences over time. Section 8.2. Long-term influence. The long-term question for Luck is whether it can become more interesting after the pressure of its original release has faded. Some animated films become cultural touchstones almost immediately. Others take years to find their audience. A movie can initially appear ordinary and later become meaningful because a generation grows up with it, or because adults revisit it and notice themes they missed as children. Luck has ingredients that make rediscovery possible. Bob is memorable. The Land of Luck is easy to remember as a concept. The emotional premise is accessible. and the central theme becomes more relevant as viewers grow older. A child might watch Sam and think the story is about getting good luck. A teenager might see a story about belonging. An adult might recognize the anxiety of trying to control every variable in life. That layered interpretation can increase rewatch value. The film also benefits from streaming availability because audiences can encounter it without needing to remember its original release. Someone discovering it years later does not have to know whether critics liked it or whether it dominated conversation. They can simply watch it. That gives original animation a second life that older distribution models did not always provide as easily. The question is whether Luck has enough distinct personality to survive alongside more established classics. Its challenge is obvious. The Land of Luck is original enough to be interesting, but the surrounding story uses many familiar animated conventions. That means the film's future reputation may depend less on whether it was revolutionary and more on whether audiences find something emotionally personal inside it. Cult films often survive because they offer exactly that. They may not be perfect. They may not be universally acclaimed, but they become meaningful to a particular audience. Luck has the potential for that kind of relationship because its central emotional question is universal. What if the thing you call bad luck is not actually proof that your life is broken? That question does not belong to 2022. It belongs to anyone who has ever wondered why life seems easier for someone else. And that is the kind of theme that can outlive a release cycle. Part 9. Critical Analysis. Section 9.1. Critics versus Audience. The gap between critical response and audience enjoyment is especially useful when discussing animated films because critics and families often approach the same movie with different priorities. A critic may ask whether the story is structurally original, whether the mythology is internally consistent, whether the pacing is efficient, and whether the emotional beats feel earned. A family may ask a simpler question: did we enjoy watching it? Luck can produce different answers depending on which question is being asked. The film's animation and world building are natural strengths. The Land of Luck provides visual ambition, while Sam and Bob offer character chemistry. The premise itself is original enough to generate curiosity, but the execution is less consistently surprising. The plot follows familiar animated adventure patterns. A protagonist discovers a hidden world, breaks rules, creates a larger problem, learns a lesson, and helps restore balance. That does not make the movie bad. It simply means the originality is concentrated more strongly in the concept than in the structure. Criticism of pacing and exposition is also understandable. The film has a lot of mythology to explain, and every explanation competes with the emotional story. When the world building becomes dense, viewers may feel that the movie is explaining its metaphor, rather than allowing the metaphor to work naturally. Audiences may be more forgiving because the characters remain appealing. Sam's motivation is easy to understand. Bob is entertaining. Hazel creates emotional stakes. The visuals provide constant movement. For younger viewers, those qualities can be enough to make the experience successful. Adults, however, may compare Luck with the strongest animated films of previous decades, where thematic depth, character development, visual innovation, and narrative structure often reinforce one another with unusual precision. That comparison can make Luck's weaknesses more visible. But the reverse is also true. A critic can identify structural weaknesses without disproving a viewer's emotional connection. Both responses can be valid. The best way to reassess luck is therefore to stop asking whether it deserves to be compared with the greatest animated films ever made. Ask instead what it accomplishes on its own terms. And on those terms it has genuine strengths. Section 9.2. Controversies, criticisms. Luck's biggest weaknesses are not mysterious. They come from the tension between an ambitious mythology and a familiar emotional structure. The concept promises a lot. The execution sometimes feels safer. The film asks us to believe in a civilization that controls luck across humanity, but some of the rules governing that system can feel convenient when the plot needs them to work a certain way. The mythology is elaborate enough to invite questions, but not every question receives an equally satisfying answer. That is a common problem with fantasy. The more rules a story introduces, the more viewers expect those rules to matter consistently. Exposition is another challenge. Because the land of luck is complicated, characters sometimes have to explain information that would be easier to absorb if the audience could simply experience it. That can slow momentum. The film also uses familiar character archetypes. The determined young protagonist, the reluctant guide, the innocent child, the comic bureaucrat, and the powerful authority figure are all recognizable roles. Again, familiarity is not automatically a flaw. Execution determines whether familiar pieces feel fresh. Some humor will inevitably work better for certain viewers than others. The broad physical comedy is accessible, but viewers looking for more subtle humor may find parts of the movie conventional. The emotional moments can occasionally feel engineered, because the story is clearly trying to make its central message land. That is especially noticeable when the metaphor is explained too directly. The best animated films often trust the audience. They allow a symbol to exist without immediately telling us what it means. Luck sometimes does the opposite. It has an interesting idea and wants to make sure we understand it. That desire for clarity can reduce some of the mystery. Still, none of these criticisms erase the